Hi, I'm Jennifer, and this is Mental and Magnolia. I started this because I have generalized anxiety disorder with depressed mood, and I'm also a therapist. I've been a therapist for 10 years. I got my bachelor's and master's degree in the field of psychology at Delta State University in Mississippi. I am currently in private practice and see a wide range of different disorders and problems, ranging from everyday life struggles all the way up to some psychotic disorders. My main specialty is in anxiety and depression, and also in grief and marriage counseling. Those are the ones that hit closest to home for me, and so they are the ones that I tend to deal with the most. I live in Mississippi, hence why I decided to name my YouTube channel Mental and Magnolia, because I live in the Magnolia State, and this is supposed to be about not just mental health, but also my experiences living in Mississippi, also the things I struggle with, and advice from you guys. If you have a question or you need advice about something, you can email me or send me a message here or on Facebook, and I'm happy to help you tackle whatever problems you're currently going through. Just a little background about me. I've lived in Mississippi almost my entire life, except for the first couple of years when I lived in Alabama. So you could say that I'm Southern all the way through. And my parents also work in the mental health field, and I also have a sister that works in the mental health field. It's kind of in my blood, and I can't imagine doing any other job. I have had a lot of struggle in my life. 10 years ago, my sister passed away from complications from her depression and committed suicide. I could go into detail about all kinds of things, but I'll hit kind of the major points. I'm 39 years old. I have a 3-year-old son. He was an embryo adoption. If you're not sure what that is, you can Google it and it will tell you all about it. Or if you'd like for me to make a video about that, I'm happy to. And then I was married. I met my husband in 2002, and we married in 2005. And he passed away in January of 2019. He had cancer for almost the entirety of our relationship. He was diagnosed about 6 months after we met. It was up and down for a really long time, and I had a lot of anxiety, and I struggled a lot of times dealing with that. And I probably will talk about that in detail in future episodes. It's difficult for me sometimes to just know where to jump in, because so much has happened to me since I was 2 years old that it's hard to know where to start. So it's kind of going to be just depending on the day and where I am at the moment, and also what questions you guys come up with. So please make sure you send me questions so I'll know kind of what you guys are interested in hearing about. I currently live in the town where I grew up. I moved back here about 6 months after my husband died. It was kind of necessary for me, even though I said I would never move back here, because my son is so young and I needed support, and I was not able to navigate things by myself because I was so fresh in my grief and I was struggling. And I had days I couldn't get out of bed. I had days that I didn't want to eat. I went inpatient for 4 days because I was so distraught and so overcome in my grief that I thought about suicide. And I knew that that wasn't healthy, and I knew that wasn't right. And I knew that I needed to do something or I wasn't going to live. So I went inpatient and I got on medication and I started therapy. And as a therapist, I should know all of those things. I should know to go to therapy immediately, but I couldn't think rationally at that point. So after that, I started therapy and things started to get better, and I moved back to my hometown, which made a big difference for me. It was hard to be in the house where my husband and I lived for 15 years, and every aspect of not just our house, but our town, every person, everything just reminded me of him and reminded me of how much I had lost. And I was so busy focusing on all of that that I couldn't see what I had now and what I had to look forward to. And so I moved. And for me, that was the right choice. And a lot of people questioned that, and a lot of people were not okay with that. But, you know, I had to do what was right for me. And my therapist at the time said something that made so much sense to me that I've, from that point on, tried to use it in my everyday life. And that was, you have to do what feels right in the moment. And what feels right in that moment can change. And that, you know, when you make a decision, it doesn't have to be permanent, and it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. And so if at that moment what feels best for you is laying in the bed, which did for me at times, then give yourself permission to do that. It's okay. You know, but also give yourself permission to get up and go somewhere. And if it's, you know, changing houses or changing cities or states that you need in order to be your best self and live your life to the glory of God, if that's your thing, it may not be, it is for me, then do that. And that's what I did. In that moment, that was what I needed. And it was the right choice for me. When I moved into my house, and it is the most peaceful place I've ever lived in my life, even with a 3-year-old running around and causing chaos and noise, it's still the most peaceful place I've ever lived in my life. And it was right for me. And there may come a day that this house and this where I'm working and this town are no longer right for me. And I'm okay with that, because I'm doing what feels right for me in that moment and what I think is best for not only me, but for my son in that moment. And nothing in this world is permanent. And so being okay with the idea of moving has given me so much peace. I don't feel anxiety about the idea that now that I've bought this house and I live in this town and I'm, you know, closer to my family, all of the anxiety around that is manageable, because I know that if I need to change, I can change. And I've had jobs in the past. I've worked in mental health for a long time, and I've done everything from community government mental health to private intensive outpatient to working in private practice. I've seen pretty much every disorder there is, except maybe for dissociative identity disorder. That's not something I've encountered yet. But almost all of the rest of them I've seen in some form or fashion. And so I go about life knowing that, you know, what I'm doing right now may not be what I'm doing in 5 or 10 years from now. I mean, let's be real, like where I am right now is definitely not where I thought I would be 10 years ago. You know, 10 years ago, I was finishing graduate school and was married, and my husband had cancer, but he was healthy. He was able to function. He went to work every day. I didn't have a kid. I was almost completely debt-free at that point. We were pretty close and managed in the next few years. But if you'd asked me 10 years ago, like where I thought I would be right now, it would not have been in any form or fashion a widow and a single parent of a 3-year-old. Because 10 years ago, I didn't think we would ever have children. And 10 years ago, my husband was in good health, and they had said that he would probably live into his mid-50s or 60s. And 10 years ago, I was just starting my journey as a therapist. And although I had gone to school, like, let me just be real, when you graduate, you don't really know much of anything. You have the fundamentals, but you learn so much more working than you ever will being in school. And so, I don't regret any of it. I'm glad that I'm in a place now, and I look back over the past 10 years and I see how every single thing in my life is part of God's path for me. And that gives me comfort, because although I don't know where I'm going, I know God has a plan for me. Which brings me to an important aspect for me is my faith. And I'm Reformed Presbyterian, if you know what that means at all. And I have been in the Reformed faith for about 9 years. So not long after I finished graduate school, we found our home church in Cleveland, in the Delta where we lived. And it was one of the hardest things leaving when I moved. It was the hardest thing to leave behind, and the only thing that made me reconsider staying, because my church was not like, I guess, a lot of churches that I've heard about. My church was full of true believers and people that love God, and they seek to serve God every day. And I don't want to get off on a tangent, because I know like this is not really about religion per se, but my faith and my belief in God is a big part of how I make my decisions in my life, and how I go about my day, and how I let God guide me a lot of times. And I pray and I read my Bible, and I do care about those things, and they're important for me, for my mental health, for my day-to-day life, for my faith, my salvation. All of those things are very important for me. And so I have to say that it is a factor for me in the decisions I make. I can leave it out of counseling a lot of times if my clients don't want that as an aspect of their therapy, and I'm familiar with other religions and their impact on people, and I do, if they want, take that into account. But I can't change who I am, and I can't change how much my faith in God and my belief in Him and His sovereignty and His grace has affected me. And so sometimes unconsciously, obviously, it does come into my therapy. And I try not to verbally state it if it's, not something my clients want. But at the same time, it's part of who I am. And so regardless if I visibly or verbally express that, it's something that is going to always influence my advice and my perspective to some degree. But I'm aware of that, and I tend to typically state, as a Christian, this is where I'm coming from. And I do tell people that, that is an influence I've received from my readings of the Bible, and from my faith, and from my salvation. And also, I think from God working through me, because like I said, like I can't imagine doing anything else. And so I think that comes from God, that this is what I'm meant to do. I'm not meant to do anything other than be a therapist and to help people discover for themselves the best path for them. Not necessarily what would be the best for me, but what would be the best for them. And so all of that to say, in the future, I plan to do both. I plan to do episodes that are just about me, just about my struggles and, my own dealing with my mental health and things I've learned to cope with my anxiety disorder, and things that I've learned to cope with my grief, and things that I've learned that help me cope with my depression. And also, I plan to do videos where I help any of you with your problems, because I know what it's like to be so alone and not have anyone to talk to, and not know where to turn, and not know the next step, or even how to start, because sometimes just finding the starting line is difficult. So I hope you guys will like and subscribe to my channel. I probably also will talk about my kid and parenting, which I feel I'm always horrible at, but you never know. You never know how you're doing until they grow up, I guess. So I hope you enjoyed this. It was a very rough first start. I've never made a video before, so hopefully it was okay, and hopefully you can understand my southern accent. I know it's thick. I'm from Mississippi, and that's just how we are. So like and subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I also will post my email, so if you want to shoot me a question anonymously or tell me about a problem you're having, I'm happy to answer.